So as mentioned, I work for the Department of Premier and Cabinet in the Better Together team, and the Better Together program was established in 2013 to improve the way state government engages people in its decision-making processes. And I'm sure you're all very familiar with that kind of language. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Better Together program and give you some examples of some of the work that we're doing there. But what I've decided to do in my talk is kind of to pull out 9 key elements that I think are sort of some of the key success factors of the program, and use some of the examples of how we're doing that. And I also want to challenge some of your thinking around what you're doing in your organisation. But firstly, I want to start off by saying that building a culture of engagement is really hard work. It takes time, it takes patience, it takes persistence, and I think it also takes a personal commitment as well. It's much more than just getting your policy or framework endorsed. To me, it's about raising awareness of the importance and benefits of good quality engagement. It's about building the capacity of staff and empowering them to deliver meaningful engagement activities. And it's about embedding effective and efficient engagement processes and systems into the way that you do work in your everyday business. I've worked in the community engagement field for some time now and across a number of different organisations. So as mentioned, I'm going to share with you 9 things that I think are key success factors. But I didn't just want this to be a listening activity. So on your tables, or if you've been handed out, you should have a piece of paper that looks a little bit like this, that's got sort of 9 key bubbles in it. And this is so that you can play along at your tables as I go. So let's just dive into it. We don't have a lot of time, and if I can go a little bit faster, we might get some time in for questions. So for me, number 1, we need top-level buy-in and a strong mandate. At state government, we're extremely fortunate that we have this mandate directly from the Premier. Now, I've just realised I've got some slides, but I don't seem to have a slide clicker. If someone could...
If you say that more loudly, hopefully the person at the back of the room will solve that problem.
Just click our slide. Oh no, it's coming. Excuse us, guys. Okay, number 1, you can read it on the board as we go. Top-level buy-in and a strong mandate, and as I mentioned, we have the Premier that's sort of leading the charge in the state, which I feel makes my job a little bit easier. And what's most important is as well as sort of touting that out in the public arena, we've got 2 documents. We've got the Better Together Principles of Engagement. You should have a copy in your show bag. And we also have Reforming Democracy, which I know was mentioned earlier this morning, which is the mandate directly from the Premier to do things differently. And this mandate is the foundation that I use as I go out to different agencies in state government. To me, this top-level buy-in is one of the most important things that you need to drive organisational change. So I'm going to challenge you to give some thought around who drives organisational change in your organisation. Who can deliver a mandate for doing things differently? So you might want to think about if this is your CEO, this is a board member, a councillor, your mayor. And so in your first bubble, you might want to pop down who has the most authority to influence organisational change, who is or who could be your top-level champion. So we got the gist. Box number 1. All right, number 2, you need an agreed organisational approach. The South Australian Government has endorsed the Better Together 6 Principles of Engagement, and this essentially becomes our central source of truth across state government to guide and to support quality engagement activities. These principles aren't instructional, and they don't demand or force our employees to do anything. But what they do, however, is acknowledge that each engagement has a different purpose, is undertaken in a different place, with different people and different outside influences. And so a significant part of my role is to promote the consideration of these principles, both in the design and the delivery of engagement activities throughout state government. So really quickly, Principle 1, we know why we're engaging. Well, that's essentially your purpose of engagement. Principle 2, we know who to engage, stakeholder analysis. Principle 3, we know the history. This is, what do we already know? What have people already told us about this issue or this topic? What data do we have? Let's try to avoid consultation fatigue. Number 4, we start together. This is probably my favourite. This is around real collaboration, early engagement, and working with people to define those issues that we want to engage on. Principle 5, we're genuine. That is that we listen to understand, that we're resourced effectively to deliver engagement activities, and that we come back and close the loop on those projects. And principle 6, we are relevant and engaging, and we use different tools for different audiences. We're creative, and we go to where the people are. Now, on the surface, they may seem very simple and easy to understand, and I think that's a good thing, because we want these principles to be accessible across the board. But if you stop and have the time to give them deeper consideration, these principles actually provide a great foundation to support best practice engagement, or, as we heard earlier, best as we can engagement. So my question to you is, what is the agreed engagement approach that you have at your organisation? Is it your policy? Is it an engagement framework? Or perhaps it's an established process to follow? Number 3, demonstration projects. I think they're really important. I think you need to create or find an opportunity to lead and influence a significant project in your organisation. And ideally, this project should have a high level of visibility both inside and outside your organisation, or a high level of importance. And what it does, it provides you with an opportunity to lead by example and to showcase how good engagement can be done and the results that brings along with you. As part of the Better Together program, we deliver a whole range of new initiatives and demonstration projects. Some of them include the citizens' juries, which we've heard a little bit about, where we bring everyday people together to reach public judgment. We run Country Cabinet, where we actually take out the Premier and Cabinet Ministers out into the country and the regions to directly talk face-to-face with community. We run participatory budgeting activities, providing funding for regional projects, and we've allocated over $1 million to tackle disadvantaged communities. And GovChat, which is essentially a telephone event where people can actually pick up the phone and call in and speak directly to ministers, the Premier, and decision makers on relevant topics. So once again, give some thought to what projects have you or could you use as a demonstration project within your organisation? How could you showcase new engagement tools and the value of high quality engagement activities? Number 4, training. This is something I'm quite passionate about because I think one of the key success factors is building staff capability and actually helping and encouraging other people to succeed. It's one of the reasons that I go to work. Training provides an opportunity to bring staff together, to learn, to share and become empowered. And at the Better Together program, we have a tiered training pathway that we've developed to help support this principle. So we have the Better Together principle training, which is essentially a 4-hour basic training session. We run monthly masterclasses that take a deeper dive and explores more specific skill set like facilitation, youth engagement, collaboration. We run large-scale showcase events where we bring in international speakers, thought leaders, we share new ideas and we network with our audiences and the South Australian population. And we also tailor specific training sessions for agencies in state government, for executive groups or for specific cohorts. So if you just stop and think about that for a moment, what types of training or capacity building activities do you do in your organisation? What else could you do? Number 5, planning advice and ongoing support. I think this is quite a tricky point I'd like to make, but I think it's an important point to raise because there's an opportunity to build the capacity of staff on an ongoing basis. And this usually occurs when you're providing planning advice for a project or if you're providing that ongoing support as part of a team. At my workplace, it looks a little bit like I'm an internal consultant, a busy one that is, where we quite often meet with project managers or engagement staff or even communication staff to assist them to improve the way that they do things. And I know from my past experiences that the best impact that we have is during the planning stage. So I encourage you to consider, if you're a really busy person like myself, as where your effort is placed and that should be placed in the planning stage. My experience has been that you actually need to tailor this advice and support depending on the project and also the personalities involved. Sometimes you might get a small win, which is actually a huge win for the teams, and other times you might get an opportunity to actually trial a new approach or a new tool. But I encourage you to use those opportunities on a day-to-day basis to build the capacity of your team members one by one. So, do you attend project meetings? Have you ever been asked for advice or help? What other opportunities could you use to provide planning advice or ongoing engagement support in your organisation? The provision of useful guides, templates and tools has also been quite instrumental to actually help others plan and deliver their engagement activities. I find it's quite helpful as it provides a great basis for staff who want to run engagement processes but don't necessarily know where to start or what to do. At the Better Together program, we actually used a whole range of feedback from our training sessions, and we actually established a set of key documents that we placed on our website to assist staff to do this. And they're all available on there. You can go and download them yourself and rebadge them and reuse them how you want. And we broke that down into 4 easy steps to help our staff understand the cycle of engagement. And we refer to them as prepare, plan, engage, and report. So what resources have you got that you know are helpful? What else could you develop or borrow that might support your organisation? So, internal champions. I've been banging on this for a number of years, but I think it's really important. I usually call these people the movers and shakers. They're normally the early adopters, and they're interested in most things shiny and new, but they get it, they understand the value of engagement, and they want to do better. At a state government level, each department or agency, we make a significant effort to actually identify and foster a good working relationship with these key people. These people are often trusted and influential within their own organisation, their own department or their own agency. So my advice is to leverage that relationship and work with them so that they can build a culture of engagement within their team or within their department. So here's a tricky one. Can you name 3 people who are or could be an internal champion in your organisation? Number 8, recognition and reward. So it's really important at the Better Together program that we recognise and showcase examples of best practice engagement and also the people that are behind those improved practices. For us, it's really about demonstrating how a change in approach or a change in delivery actually improves and increases public value. So it could be as simple as giving some praise for someone in a team. It could be emailing their manager or perhaps applying for an award on their behalf. One of the ways that we do this at Better Together is actually to use case studies to identify what some of those changed approaches are and some of the learnings that have come out of it and some of the rewards that they've received. It actually allows our departments and our friends to say, you know, our project was identified as a case study from the Better Together program, and we're able to lift them up and motivate them and encourage them to keep going. And you can find those case studies on our websites. So give some thought for number 8 for your little speech bubble. How do you provide recognition and reward? And perhaps what else could you be doing in that space? Number 9, we're almost there, bear with me. So with limited resources, it's pretty impossible to provide advice and support to every engagement activity being undertaken in your organisation, and especially in a state government context. So building and maintaining a local network of interested people and practitioners that support each other is one of our key strategies. The Better Together team, over time, and I'll say that over time, has developed both a physical and an online community of practice that actually allows us to share our ideas and our knowledge, our successes and our failures, and our resources so that we can continue to network. And I need to say that it does require an investment, not only to set those up, but to maintain them and keep them going. So my final question, if you've got one spare bubble left on your piece of paper, who would be in your community of practice? Who do you look for support, and who looks to you for support? And how do you think you could stay connected? So I hope you've been playing along at the table and you had a chance to reflect on some of my insights and learnings and how they can be applied to your organisation. And I think we'll have time for questions at the end, possibly. So I will flick through, thank you very much, and get us set up for our next speaker.
Thanks, Dan. I thought that was a really nice follow-on from Gail this morning, but I think it was also a great follow-on from that discussion we had this morning about how do we get away from single projects and have a system and a framework. I did forget to say before, when I was introducing that Lisa's stepping in for Jason, we're actually going to get to see Jason on a video as well in this next 15 minutes. So I'd now like to introduce Lisa Alexander. Both of them, of course, are from the Department of State Development in South Australia.
Thanks, everyone. I'm stepping in for Jason Downs today. He's actually on a secondment to DPC, and he's running our state's largest engagement program about the state's future in the nuclear fuel cycle. So he's actually in a very remote Aboriginal community today, so that's why he couldn't be with us today. So, as Kimber said, my name's Lisa Alexander, and I actually joined DSD only last week after spending 12 months in DPC actually working with Dan. So that's how small Adelaide is. So I'm very familiar with both Dan's work and also Jason's work after working with Jason over the last few years on his 90-day change project and also his stakeholder engagement framework, which is on your tables. So I'm very familiar with him, so I can answer your questions at the end if you want to know more. So before playing Jason's video, I just want to build on Dan's presentation and present a bit of a case study about how a department's actually putting in place the success factors that Dan's just been through. And I'll provide a bit of context for you and also a bit of an overview of DSD. So DSD helps industry, business and communities identify and capitalise upon opportunities for job creation and economic growth. It's the lead agency for 6 out of 10 of the Premier's economic priorities. So it has a very important role for our state as we transition from a manufacturing economy to a new economy. And so I've recently joined the stakeholder engagement team, which is a new team that's been created for capacity building and providing expert advice and support for stakeholder engagement across the skills and employment division, which is focusing on the third dot point of the slide there. So stakeholder engagement in DSD certainly wouldn't be where it is today without the efforts of Jason, which he's been focusing on for 4 or 5 years now. So without his efforts and also supported by the Better Together program, which is the Premier's mandate, without those 2 factors, DSD wouldn't have the culture that it has today. So the Better Together provides the authorising environment, if you like. DSD is a diverse department of over 2,000 staff, and it was 2 major agencies of mineral and resources and higher education that were merged together with Arts SA and a vast array of statutory corporations like the museum and the library and the art gallery. So they were merged into one large department in 2014. And Jason started developing the DSD stakeholder engagement framework before the department merged. So he really had to go back and take a new approach and gain the buy-in of the chief executive and get that top-level support that Dan has stressed how important it is. So on your tables there should be some USBs that has a range of resources for supporting the presentation today. And if you don't get one, you'll be able to email Jason or myself to get a copy. So with the chief executive buy-in and support of the executive group, the stakeholder engagement framework was really the organisational approach that Dan mentioned. So that's been really underpinning the work of DSD. And the business areas are now adopting the framework and the Better Together principles in their engagement practices, supported by a network of engagement ninjas who are the IAP2 trained staff. So that's the community of practice that Dan was mentioning. And before we move into Jason's video, I want to share this Wilbur's 4Q model for organisational change. This is what Jason's work has been based on. So for DSD at the individual level, 125 people have completed the IAP2 5-day certificate, and that's from executive right down to frontline staff and across all divisions to really get that breaking down of silos happening by having people from all different divisions trained in IAP2. And the culture change has been created through developing a shared language and bringing together divisions as a community of practice. And these are the Ninja network, which are trained by IAP2. And DSD has celebrated their small wins along the way and recognised good practice through case studies that are on their intranet site. And at the system level, there's an online stakeholder engagement library, which Jason will talk about in more detail in the video. And at the relationship level, DSD has identified champions and fostered good relationships with them, and also outside of government, not just within their own agency. So DSD has had some good engagement outcomes over the last 2 years based on Jason's work. Some examples of this are the Northern Economic Plan, which is focused on moving automotive workers to a new economy, and also the copper strategy. So that was a collaborative approach with a number of stakeholders, and that wouldn't have been possible without the work of Jason. So I'll move on to Jason's video now, which hopefully will magically appear from the back.
Okay, thank you, Lisa, for the introduction, and my apologies for not being there today. This is definitely not my preferred style of engagement or conversation, definitely not good for networking. However, under the circumstances, a little bit necessary. The reason I'm not there, as Lisa May said, is that I am right now today engaging with the Aboriginal community out at Yalata, which is about a 10-hour drive west of Adelaide, and undertaking a role within the Department of Premier and Cabinet. I've been pulled across to assist with the statewide engagement of the Nuclear Fuel Cycle Royal Commission, and we have put together an engagement strategy that is essentially the largest one ever done in South Australia, which is pretty intense. We've done 100 communities over 3 months, 130 different engagement events. So it's not because I don't want to be there, it's because I physically cannot be there at this point in time. I'll start with an acknowledgement to country and acknowledge the traditional owners upon the land that you are meeting today. It is the land of the Kaurna people, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present. In my role within DSD, it's one of a strategic role. It is leader for engagement and put together as an important way to change and create culture within the department. When we started, we're 2.5 years old. When we started, it was a matter of creating a culture that enabled stronger engagement with the community and stronger engagement across the department, and chopping down some of the silo mentality that existed, as well as doing better engagement with other government departments, because surprise to some, that doesn't really happen as well as it should or could. Where we've done this has been very much at all levels within the department, and before I jump into how we've done it, I just wanted to mix things up a bit and actually talk about some of the keys to success. So what has made this possible is an authorising environment. We couldn't have done it without it. We've had a Premier who from the day one that he came in has talked about a stronger deliberation and discussion with those that are impacted by the policies and programs that we are working towards. So for us, having that authorising environment from our Premier and leading it very strongly across departments has been fantastic. We've got a very strong support from our CE, who took the lead and encouraged us to develop our stakeholder engagement framework, which you will all get a copy of. And he also did the launch at our all of staff comms to drive the change. So from the top level right down to the bottom level, we've been infiltrating a cultural change. We've had the excellent support of the DPC team, and the Better Together work has been enabled us to have a line of sight. And with that line of sight and with those principles, there is a much easier way to have a conversation with those that don't necessarily believe or see the value in what we're aiming to achieve. So the Better Together principles have been very important for us. The collaboration is a critical part in the activities, and we put together a 90-day change team that was a collaboration with 12 government departments, and first time ever we've done that and talked about what are our challenges, what are our issues, and shared information on who's doing what, how they're doing it, and what we can learn from each other. That really did help to provide us with some information on what was best practice and what we could learn from and share with each other. And out of that, what I developed was what I call an engagement recipe that we've shared with others. And again, you'll have a copy of that within the info as well to take away and have fun with. The most important thing is to celebrate the wins, and it's a critical part of that success is to not be out there at the front flag waving and doing the chest beating, look at me, but just to celebrate and acknowledge the wins and the successes, and look at bringing others along to understand that by doing things in a smarter and better way of engagement, you can actually achieve a lot more. What are the challenges? Well, working in government certainly has its challenges. We as a department, being 2.5 or 2 years old, have had major restructures, and with that comes fear of change and a lot of patch protection and a lot of personality issues. Very, very small budget. So I'm one person in a department operating at a strategic level. I don't work in the marketing and comms area, and I apologise if I'm going to offend anyone here, but I'm not a fan of putting engagement in a marketing and comms structure. I don't personally think it works unless there is a very strong engagement culture within that area. So if I was there, I would happily debate that with people. Feel free to ring me up and have that conversation. The competing issues that I've had have definitely played on how effective we've been. Being strategic is one thing, but then having to be operational and then delivery and deep diving with some teams has had its challenges. Time obviously is the biggest hurdle, never enough, and always last minute. People ironically just want engagement done really well, but leave it to the last minute, and then that creates a hell of a lot of risk, which I'm sure you're familiar with. So they're the challenges, and they are the frustrations, and they are the keys to success. So how have we done this? What we did was very strategic. We brought together a couple of executives who were going to support the approach. We developed a strategy and also a framework which came out of that 90-day project framework, which you'll have. I used the Wilbur's 4Q model. Now that came to me in an engagement, in a training program that was run through IAP2 by the very talented trainer Barbara Chappell. And for me, it just jumped out as the most logical way, not only to do things, but also to communicate to others within the organisation that here is a structure and a framework that we can take and create a change in a discipline area that people tend to think is just a nice thing to do. So we looked at the individual level, and how do we start with that in terms of creating change? We did a lot of training, and in the last 2.5 years, and in the 2 years in the other agency that we were in, we also did the same approach. And now we have 125 people that have done the 5-day training program across the department at all levels, at an executive level right through to a front counter level, and in all parts of the department. And it's very important that you take the training across the department and not focus on one area, because otherwise we have a continued silo. By doing that training and then bringing these ninjas, these engagement ninjas, which is what we've called ourselves, together, we actually collaborate very well now, by default, as opposed to by a strategy and not by an initiative and by a program. And each ninja supports the other, so if they've got some work to do or they need some help, then they'll put a call out through the email, and people will support them, and it's working really well. So the training, critical element. Can't create change unless you create an understanding and some knowledge and some tools, and most importantly a shared language, and that's helped us immensely. When you're in a conversation and somebody's saying, well, we want to consult, we then are able to pull that apart and actually say, well, what do you actually mean? The continued support with the ninjas is critical, so we do formal interactions about every 2 months just to share information, share frustrations, learn from each other, and we'll often bring in somebody from outside to work with us. At a cultural level, we've created a culture. We've created a culture of knowledge and information through that shared language and through those shared tools. We've developed some case studies which are critical because they then tell their own story, and ironically the executive director or the director tells our story for us with those good engagement examples embedded in it. We've celebrated the easy wins, and we've used those again to communicate what's happening. The ninja culture in itself is fantastic. The momentum is excellent, and it's working really, really well. One of the things that we have done to keep the enthusiasm up and support each other is something very simple. We all have our little government swipe cards that we have to use to get in each day. On the back of our swipe cards, you have to have done the training, and then you get one of these, and you are an official engagement ninja. So it's amazing how highly prized those have become, and how many people have asked for one and can't have one until they've done the training. So just little things like that have created a very good culture. In terms of the systems, this one's a big one, and it did require a lot of effort and a lot of energy. We put together an online engagement portal, which is effectively our library. So people can go to our library, anyone within the department, download tools, look for techniques. They can look at all the case studies. We have all of the engagement ninjas on the register so that other people can find out who knows about this stuff and actually do it. It's working very well. The thing that I'm really most proud of is we've actually developed an online engagement template which helps people that have done the training, but also those that haven't, to go through the engagement template and create their own engagement plan. It's intuitive, which is fantastic, and it helps you to map things out, but then it will tell you what type of engagement to undertake, whether it's at the collaborate or at the empower or down at the inform level. And it's working really well. I do apologise that I can't show you that today. I'd love to. It's an intranet site at the moment, and soon hopefully it will be an internet site, and we'll be sharing it much wider. I think there's lots to learn from sharing information, and I'm certainly somebody that's more than happy to do that. So grab one of my business cards and feel free to email me or ring me up and ask questions. So that's what we're doing, and it's working again very well. The last one, the important one, is the relationships. None of this has been possible without good relationships, from the CE right through. And I've worked my relationships not only within the department but outside of the department, people like Dan and others who have the knowledge but also know others and can sit down every now and then, have a cup of coffee and share those oh my gosh moments, as well as pick each other's brains. So relationships within the department create opportunity. Relationships without the department, outside of the department, help to build the opportunity. So very important. And I'm going to wrap up with those comments that relationships, and the reason that the IAP2 exists is not only to create knowledge and information, but to build relationships and network, and to collaborate and support each other. So enjoy the conference and do the networking, learn from others. Dan is fantastic to talk with, and as is Lisa, who is a great supporter and has a vast amount of knowledge. So I'll leave with my final comment, and that is that for me, engagement is no longer a nice to have. It is a discipline. It's a very challenging discipline. Those of you that are doing this work will understand what I mean by that, but it's a very important discipline. So we all need to keep pushing and raising the awareness that it's important that we do this well and that we continue to do things well. So thank you for listening to me. I hope there's been some benefit. Please do get in touch with me if you want to know more, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. very interesting to clap someone who's not quite in the room with us. I think it's quite a very exciting time for people who are in South Australia, who have this really strong authorising environment at the moment and can do this fabulous work about embedding frameworks in their organisations. The team have put up a list of contacts there. If you will just leave them up as we do the changeover, if you want to come up and get those contacts. Dan and Lisa have also been exceedingly generous with both that simple reflection sheet, but a whole lot of resources if you've been one of the people able to get one of those lovely memory sticks that are on your tables. I'd just like to ask, is there anyone sitting? We've got time for 2 questions. Is anyone sitting with a burning question? Yes. And Wendy, I don't know if we have microphone runners in the room. Perhaps tell me and I will repeat it. Or here it comes. Is the microphone coming? Yep. Yep. Front. Thank you. Do you two want to come and stand with me, please?
So it's actually a question about that authorising environment. I mean, a lot of this comes from the Premier. From a distance, I guess it looks a bit kind of top-down, and yet everyone I speak to reflects that people have been brought along. So what's the Premier done to make that an authorising environment rather than an authoritarian environment? And has there been resistance to that, ostensibly top-down?
I'll let you take Just remember you're being filmed.
Oh, well, firstly, of course there's been resistance. I think it's our nature to want to put up a front when we're faced with change, and so I think that's something that we just need to work through as individuals and as professionals, pardon me, because we are in a changing world and changing environment. I think you make a really good point. We have talked a lot about the authorising environment and the top-down approach, and I guess I'm making that point that that's something that you should strive to achieve and influence where you can. And I guess I came into the Better Together program with a Premier who kind of got engagement. But we did a lot of work behind the scenes to actually build his knowledge and his capacity to actually front that up, put it into a document and get the right words correctly, get the sign-off for him before we actually roll that out. And that did include work with senior executives to make sure they are on board. And for me, to get some kind of organisational change, you not only need your ceiling at the top sort of pushing down, but you need this groundswell and movement from the bottom, which is your everyday practitioners doing the work, project managers, the people that are in this space. And I think without those two kind of pushing upwards and downwards, you actually don't get organisational change taking place. So it's a really good point, and thank you for raising.
I might just add something to that. Yeah, it is a good point, and as Dan said, you need the top down and the bottom up, but I guess what we've done, I'll put my Better Together hat on now, over in Better Together was the training. So there's almost 1,200 people across state government that have done the Better Together principles training and masterclasses. So they're the ones pushing it in their agencies, and the Premier's pushing it down to the executive so they don't get to those barriers. And there are still a few barriers, but it's a work in progress. But definitely the training of 1,200 staff is quite significant since 2013, so that's definitely helping.
Thank you. We have been asked to end this session at 2:40. I assume that is so you can get to your next session at 2:45. So as there weren't a rush of hands, I'm going to say thank you very much to Dan and get the departments correct this time, the Department of Premier and Cabinet, and to Lisa from the Department of State Development, and to thank the people sponsors, the Local Government Association of South Australia. In thinking about how this work connects to what we've heard this morning, my mind has gone to the authorising environment as well, and to think about these wonderful frameworks and this fabulous work that's being done, but to think about it in the next era. What's this going to look like when we don't have the authorising environment and we don't have us standing there doing this great work? So my mind is going to be thinking over the next little while about beyond authorising environments. Thank you all for being here, and we'll see you at the next session.